When Nixium was 12, he had a sleepover with his friend. His friend told him to prank call a random number, so he typed a random number into his phone, and to his amazement, it actually rang. After about 5 seconds, someone picked up and said,
"Hello."
Then Nixium said,
"Hi, can I order a pizza?"
Then the person said,
"Sure, what do you want in it? Your sister, your mom, your friend who's sitting next to you?"
He talked in a deep voice, and Nixium was freaked out by this. He hung up and was hyperventilating. He looked out the window and saw some guy in a hoodie. Nixium ran to the kitchen and grabbed a flashlight. It turned out to be his brother. He doesn't know how his brother did it, but it scared the hell out of him.
Last week, Dolan went with two friends, Tolop and Sid, to the park. After walking around for almost half an hour, they decided to go to the nearest mall to play at the gaming centre. But when they were there, Tolop and Sid suddenly pulled out a radio from their bags. Dolan didn't know what the fuck was going on until they started having a music battle that went for 10 long minutes. Then they started to argue about who had the better music. After a few seconds of arguing, they asked Dolan who had the better music. Dolan's taste was kind of different from theirs, so he just left saying,
"Okay, I'm out."
He doesn't know what happened to them, but he's pretty sure that a security guard got involved. The weirdest punishment Sweet Commando's parents ever gave him was when he had to go outside and pick up every little stick, leaf, and loose piece of grass. He was out all day doing that, but it only got better. After that, they made him clean the entire house with only a sponge, and said that everything had to look brand new. Then, Sweet Commando had to cook dinner, wash the dishes, and cut and squash strawberries so that his mother could make a pie. Needless to say, he never did anything bad ever again.
One night, Danger Dolan and his friend went to a club. Naturally, Dolan ended up getting drunk. He ran into the bathroom where he rubbed soap on his face, then ran out while singing, "Baby, baby, baby, one more time." To everyone in the club, his friend sprinted over to him and tried to calm him down, but Dolan just threw some soap at him that he had in his pocket. They haven't spoken since.
Up until age 19, I didn't know how to ride a bike. Crazy, I know, but it's true. I got asked out by this crazy cute guy when I was 18, and he told me the date would be a surprise. See where this is going? Sure enough, he booked us a romantic, scenic biking tour along the river. For anyone else, this would have seemed like the most perfect first date idea ever. But as someone that could barely balance on a bike, I panicked and made up the stupidest excuse I could think of, followed by the stupidest alternative suggestion I could make. I said, "I hurt my ankle this weekend, so I won't be able to bike. How about we go dancing instead?" Needless to say, there was no second date.
An unprofessional experience Gooby had was when her and her family were at a fast food restaurant. While they were eating, they overheard a woman gossiping about some people, and as curious human-fish hybrids, they listened in. Until the woman and the other workers started having a cussing party. Gooby's dad got up and asked them politely to stop because he had children there, as Gooby was 6 at the time and her siblings were 3, 5, and 7. They stopped for a few minutes, then started back up. So her dad asked for the manager and they said, "Hell no, we don't want to get fired, go sit down." Her dad got angry and went to the manager's office, leaving Gooby and her siblings at the table. They heard them cussing and they started repeating words without realizing what they were actually saying. Her dad finally came back from talking to the manager and heard them cussing. He said, "Don't ever say those words again." The workers looked and laughed. Then one of them shouted, "You need to work on your parenting skills." Gooby's dad was more angered than ever and clocked the man in the face before taking off in their car. They got 7 people fired that day.
The weirdest reason Melissa ever got arrested was when she was in the 11th grade. One night, she walked to a gas station to get some snacks. She saw a policeman behind the counter getting some cigarettes. Melissa grabbed some chips and walked to the counter, saying,
Good evening.
The policeman's face turned red, like a tomato. He asked, "Are you making fun of me?" In shock from the policeman's question, Melissa said she wasn't and apologized. Seeing the shocked look on her face, the policeman said, "It's not okay to disrespect a policeman." After that, he drove Melissa to the police station where she stayed for 3 hours.
Dolan once had this crazy friend who his parents forbid him from seeing. One time, they were hanging out together when the crazy friend offered Dolan $100 if he could shoot him in the kneecap with his BB gun. Dolan was desperate for money and lacking in common sense, so he said,
Sure, That sounds perfectly reasonable.
He passed out from the pain, and when he woke up, he was in the emergency room. His crazy friend's mom gave him $1,000, probably to stop Dolan's family from suing.
Pandora was sitting in the lunchroom in 8th grade talking to her friends when suddenly these two girls started yelling at each other. One thing led to another, and the next thing they knew, these two girls were punching each other, screaming and pulling each other's hair. Pandora asked someone what the fight was about, and apparently it started when one of them had apparently stolen the other girl's seat. So naturally, they both beat the shit out of each other. When Pandora walked past the detention room later that day, the two girls were inside fighting again. Must have been some goddamn glorious chair.
Throughout school, Sid was a regular bullying victim because his voice was higher than most other boys. He also had to wear a chest brace under his shirt because of a deformation of his ribcage. The bullying involved having items knocked out of his hands, name calling, and even one time a bully blindsided him and banged his head against a wall. The worst thing was during Sid's 7th year when 3 girls made him the primary target because his father worked at the same school that they attended. Sid's father regularly had to reprimand the girls for their behaviour and their actions. One day during PE, the girls ambushed him outside the locker room and hauled him off to the gym where they strapped a shock collar to his neck. He tried to get away from them, but the pain caused by the collar prevented him from moving. It went off whenever he yelled at them or shouted from the pain. This went on for some time before someone found him, and the 3 girls were expelled thanks to his father having full knowledge of their permanent records. To this day, Sid still has a great deal of resentment for anything resembling a collar, having things on his neck, and only this past year did he get over his crippling fear of visible electricity and lightning.
Honey Bits was working at the cashier for a Vietnamese restaurant in a food court when a lady came up to the counter and plopped her toddler on the counter. She turned him towards her and said, "Tell the lady what you want." "I want a spring roll," the kid somehow gobbles out. "So cute," the mother cooed as Honey Bits went over to the hot food storage to grab a spring roll for the kid. Honey Bits told the woman the spring roll would be $1.50 and waited for her to pull out her money. Instead she said, "But he's so cute, why won't you just give it to him? It's only like $1." Honey Bits was stunned at the request and said, "I'm sorry, I don't have the authority to give out free food. Please pay for it. Like you said, it's only $1." The mother grabbed her kid, who started wailing, and walked away angry.
2 years ago, Civil Spider and a couple of his friends were hanging out at his house playing video games. At the time, his parents were out drinking, so Civil Spider and his friends had the whole house to themselves. Well, at least for a time, until his parents, who were extremely drunk, came home. Once they were home, they went to the room to have sex. The problem with that was his room was right next to his parents' room, so they ended up hearing everything. Despite telling his friends that they should move to a different room, being the hormonal teenagers they were, they wanted to listen. After all that, Civil Spider couldn't look at his parents or his friends the same way again.
When Ramona was about 8 years old, she had a fear of strawberries. She doesn't know why, but she always feared them because the seeds were on the outside. So she thought that if she ate them, the little seeds would launch out of the strawberry and plant in her mouth. Ramona thought about how painful it would be to have a strawberry plant growing in her mouth, and since the seeds were so small, she would never be able to get them out. After a lot of convincing, Ramona's mom got her to try them, and now they're Ramona's second favorite fruit. Mikhailum had this insane music teacher, and whenever his classmates had their hands up, she would either ignore them or say she wasn't open to questions. So it was the second to last hour of the day, and Mikhailum was in 4th grade. He had to pee really badly, so he raised his hand and kept it raised for half of the class period until he could hardly hold it anymore. He blurted out,
"I have to go to the bathroom."
She replied, "No you don't. You can hold it. You just want to get out of the classroom." Mikhailum waited another 5 minutes before saying,
"I really have to go."
And she said, "I didn't call on you, Mikhailum. I'm not taking any questions right now, and you can't leave until I say you can." There were 10 minutes left in the class period, and he was dying. So he got up and left, with her yelling, "Where do you think you're going? Come back here!" It actually turned out that holding it that long gave him really bad cystitis. So Mikhailum spent the next day in the hospital. She ended up giving him a suspension that day. What a bitch.
Well, this guy and I weren't officially dating, but these days that seems to be pretty common. We'd been dating for about 3 months. He was very busy studying for exams, so I decided to surprise him by giving him a present consisting of various things to help him out. Moleskin notebooks, a coffee mug with actual coffee beans, I did have a coffee maker, a couple of great pens and highlighters, and even a cute little motivational card. Because I was tracking the package, I saw that he'd received it and signed for it personally. But he didn't say anything. No thank you, no text, nothing. I messaged him a full week later after he'd received the gift, having heard nothing from him, and he said, "I haven't opened it yet because it wasn't a priority." Who the heck can't make 2 minutes to open a present sent from the person they're dating in 7 days? Anyway, I took the hint and realized he was not worth my affections.
One time, Melissa decided to sneak into a horror movie about mummies. When her stepmom found out, she was grounded because she was too young to see it. However, her punishment for Melissa consisted of wrapping her up like a mummy and leaving her on the bed. Melissa's boyfriend at the time came and rocked her side to side so she could sleep during her punishment.
When Honey Bits was walking home from school, she saw a stranger carrying a cup who splashed coffee on another random stranger. It just so happened that the victim of the splashing was a person that had been bullying Honey Bits for her whole life. Honey Bits watched the stranger get into their car and drive off as the bully's mom cussed him out. Before driving off, the stranger smiled and looked right at Honey Bits. She later found out it was her mom's boyfriend, and her mom had told him about the bullying issue. He's pretty much one of her favorite people now. One of the cringiest things someone's ever said to Froggy was when she was on the phone with her friend. Sometimes they would find pickup lines and read them to each other. Of course, they were only joking around and didn't mean any of them. But the one she remembers most is one that her friend sent her. "Are you my homework? Because I'm gonna slam you on the table and do you all night." Yep, it was hot. Oh, I mean cringy. Yeah, that's what they wrote, cringy. Yep, it was cringy.
Being in a Catholic school, Dolan was in 5th grade and his sister was in 7th grade when they learned of the silly things that were banned. There were usual things that were banned like Beyblade cards and handheld games, but the dumbest thing to have been banned happened one winter from a new principal at the time. There was plenty of snow and many kids liked to make snow forts and snowmen, but there were a good amount of troublemakers who would have snowball fights on the school grounds. So the new principal had taken action one day and turned on the speakers to talk to the school. "It has come to my attention that there have been many incidents involving snow. Therefore, there are going to be some changes. There will be no more playing with snow, touching of snow, or even standing on snow. I hope that our school grounds will be a safer place for everyone while at school." Standing on snow? Dolan doesn't know how someone bans standing on snow during recess, when the whole grounds are never shoveled. Needless to say, the walk home from school with his sister was full of laughter at how stupid it sounded.
Mimi used to babysit for a friend who had a little girl. One day, while she was watching her, the little girl went to the bathroom. But after a few minutes, Mimi heard her shouting at the top of her lungs, "Sugar fairies! Where are the sugar fairies?" She went to see what the girl was doing, and when she opened the door, Mimi saw her sitting in the bathtub, pouring a container of sugar over her head while holding a piece of toast. She was shouting for the sugar fairies to come and take her away.
One of the craziest things that Sid's ex ever did was argue about the clothes hangers in the front closet. They all had to be the same color. Not only that, but everything else had to be the same. Nothing could be different. She was unable to explain to Sid why the closet needed to be organized that way. Instead, she gave him a look as though he was supposed to understand. A big fight ensued. Salty Squid was drinking at a friend's house until it got late. He walked home and was so drunk he couldn't even get the key into the lock. So Salty Squid decided he would just walk around the block, sober up, and try again. As he walked up the street, he noticed the back window was open with just the screen in the way. Salty Squid figured he would just remove the screen and crawl in. So he did just that, instead of just getting the key into the lock in the front door. Once he crawled in, he heard a voice in the dark ask, "Who the hell are you?" Immediately, Salty Squid jumped back out the window and ran down the street. Turns out, he'd broken into his neighbor's house by mistake.
One time in high school, Gergak was eating at a food court when his friend Mikhailum came up and asked, "Do you want to go to the middle of a food court in a Goku outfit and scream like a Super Saiyan for $200? Gergak wanted a couple of new video games, so he said sure, got changed and went to the middle of the food court. He started screaming and people started to look at him. He stood there and screamed for about a full minute until he was kicked out. Mikhailin was laughing his ass off while giving Gergak his $200. Afterwards, Gergak went to GameStop and got his new game.
Ladybot's childhood best friend was a guy. At a sleepover one night, they were innocently talking about biology. Her friend knew that girls were different to guys, so he asked her,
Hey Ladybot, how many balls do girls have?
She was very young and had no idea what balls were. He asked again like it was common knowledge, so she took a guess at it because she didn't want to seem stupid or anything. So according to young, innocent Ladybot, girls have 13 balls. Highly accurate. When Melissa's brother turned 18, her parents took him and the whole family to a fancy restaurant. Everyone was laughing, having a great time. When the staff brought the cake out, they all sang happy birthday. Melissa's dad proposed a toast, so they all ordered drinks. Melissa got a root beer, and when she tasted it, she didn't think it was sweet enough. So she took 4 packets of sugar and dumped them all in at once. The next thing Melissa knew, the soda was shooting out like a Mentos bomb. Melissa jumped up and yelled, "Oh my god!" right in the middle of a super serious toast. The entire restaurant went silent and Melissa's mum shot her a look like she was gonna beat the shit out of her. Melissa was obviously pretty embarrassed.
Just a few years ago, when Mikhailin was in his senior year of high school, the school started to really crack down on security, following every last law and rule there was. This included the laws of stalking of a minor. In the state where he grew up, it is illegal to take a picture of a person younger than 18 without their direct consent. At certain times of the day, like lunch, students could have their phones out. But as soon as these rules came into play, they had teachers monitoring them at all times. People caught using the camera app, even if accidental, were given detention and even occasionally suspended. Cameras were confiscated immediately, and their memories were wiped. The school photography class was shut down. Not that bad for a normal school, but this school was well renowned around the country for its art program. The strange thing is, it is perfectly legal to take a picture of a minor without consent as long as you yourself are a minor, which almost everyone in the school was. One time, when Civil Spider was in primary school, he took a seat next to his crush at lunch and tried to think of ways to impress her. He figured she would like him if he just showed her how smart he was. His plan was to get her attention, grab the nearest book, and say,
"Look how fast I can read this."
Civil Spider then sat there silently speed reading the entire book. When he finished, he looked up and saw that his crush had walked away.
Ghost Toast once worked at a call center that sells dietary supplements. For a few weeks, he got some wrong number calls asking if they were a bank, mentioning some class action settlement. Ghost Toast told these callers they had the wrong number, and most people accepted this. But there was one caller who couldn't quite get it into his head. He asked about the bank settlement, and Ghost Toast said, "Sorry sir, you have the wrong number. We sell dietary supplements here." Instead of accepting this, the caller said, "Well, get me to the right department then." Ghost Toast had to spell it out to him that he was calling an entirely different company. The customer just refused to accept this and kept insisting he be transferred to the right department. This went on for several minutes until the caller demanded to speak to Ghost Toast's supervisor. Ghost Toast then transferred him, and the same circular conversation continued for 45 more minutes before the moron finally hung up the phone.
One time, Tolop and his friend went to get some pizza. They were about to walk into their favorite pizza place when 2 sketchy guys came rushing out of the restaurant in a hurry. Tolop thought that was super strange, but they went inside anyway. The guy at the counter looked really shaken up. Tolop was about to ask him what happened when suddenly 2 cops came barging in, shouting, "Put your hands up!" They slammed Tolop and his friend on the ground and put cuffs on them. They were just about to put Tolop and his friend into their squad car when an employee ran outside to stop them. He said Tolop and his friend were not the robbers they were looking for. They were just trying to buy some pizza. The cops apologized and Tolop got some free pizza, a weird story, and some free mild trauma. What a deal.
Doopy's mum bought her a dildo for Christmas, which was already weird. But then she had Doopy open it in front of the entire family. To make matters worse, she took photos of the whole thing, and now she shows all her friends and also some random strangers.
This happened, I think, about a year ago, and it still pisses me off. I was in a building that had about 10 floors, quite a few number of tenants. and me and Gooby were just kind of lounging around minding our own business, asleep I think, and then the fire alarm went off. And so we were scrambling all over the fucking apartment, grabbing some shit, trying to get the cat into her fucking box. She just would not get in the box. She's just being a pain in the ass. And then finally, we managed it and went out the front of the building with everyone else, and we were waiting, oh my god, there's a fire, everyone's gonna die. And then the firemen came, and then they left, and I asked them, hey, what happened? They were like, oh, one of your neighbors was smoking outside, and they must have left it and not put it out, and so it triggered the alarm. I'm like, what? It's stupid! And so we all had to get up at 3 a.m. and wait for like an hour in morbid terror. That's not the worst part. The worst part is while I was looking for my cat, my keys fell off my chain and I was locked out of my apartment all night because the real estate that had the backup keys weren't open until 9 a.m. And so Gooby and I luckily met a neighbor that let us stay over there for the night. And then we went out, we got some breakfast, we came back, got the spare key and got inside. All because some dickhead, probably helping, didn't put out their fucking cigarette.
One time at Applebee's, Snoopy and her family were sitting next to some out-of-control kids, and their mom, who clearly couldn't have cared less. The three of them were running around and screaming. Now that was annoying, but that was not the big deal. But then, one of the children, who looked to be about 8, picked up a ketchup bottle, aimed it at his sister, and squeezed it, but hit Snoopy instead. It got all over her hair and her clothes. They were kicked out immediately after that, but it was too late to help Snoopy.
Pringle worked at a McDonald's when he was much younger. While working the front counter one day, a couple came up to order. The guy said, "I'll have 2 McDoubles," then casually turned to the girl, pulled out a ring box, and said, "Will you marry me?" Pringle was in total shock as he finished taking their order, and for some reason he couldn't understand, she said yes. Proposing to your girl while in the line at McDonald's, that's really setting a standard for your marriage.
When Doopy was around 6, her family went to Toronto for the summer. On the plane, she found herself sitting with her sister and a total stranger. Doopy was a pretty social kid, so she tried to start a conversation with him. She said hi, but the stranger was reading a book and ignored her. She tried again a couple more times, but he wouldn't acknowledge her. Doopy got very frustrated, gave him a little nudge in the shoulder. Still didn't say anything. She had very little patience for being ignored, so she slapped the book out of the guy's hands and screamed,
Why won't you talk to me?
Nixium and his twin were at an arcade celebrating their birthday. The arcade had a party room and they had quite a few people for the party, so they got to eat in there. Nixium's mum had quite a few drinks and got to talking politics with another family member. Just as the waiters came in to give them their food, Nixium's mum said, "I don't think Abraham Lincoln should have freed the slaves." And yes, the waiters were black. Nixium and his siblings will not let her forget that day.
Pandora was in math class, taking a test. She had glasses on, and her teacher was dumb. He didn't take down the math posters. They were behind Pandora by the window. She used the reflection of her glasses to get the answers. She looked down at her test, but in the reflection of her glasses in the top right corner, Pandora could see all of the answers. He would have caught her if she looked behind her. A couple of kids looked behind them, and they had to redo a harder version of the test.
In 9th grade, there was a girl who was always kind of shy and had her nose in a book, but was so cute that Sid crushed hard for her. Since he was a bit of a nerd himself, he reached out to her and they became fast friends. Eventually, she started inviting a skinhead who was a junior in high school to join them. The guy kinda freaked Sid out, but he decided not to judge. One night, Sid gathered the nerve to ask her out when they were all at the food court at the local mall. The skinhead flipped out and started threatening him, shouting at the top of his lungs and spraying spittle everywhere. It turned out the two were already dating, and the guy was very territorial. The following Monday, he and his high school friends jumped Sid on the way home from school and beat the shit out of him. The girl dumped the skinhead because of that, but when Sid asked her if she wanted to date, she said, "Sorry, but not after you got your ass handed to you like that."
One time, Pringle and his sister wanted to try out this online soundboard that was full of Michael Jackson voice samples, so they prank called a stranger. When the man on the other end picked up, Pringle used Michael's voice to talk about handcuffing children to a bed and feeding them milk and cookies. Instead of realizing that it was an obvious prank, the man got really upset and said,
"You are one sick puppy, Michael. How the hell could you do that?"
He started ranting and raving and didn't once question that it was Michael Jackson who was randomly calling him. Pringle had to bury his face in a pillow to keep from laughing.